All right. Hi, everybody. Good to see you again for another episode of Zoom from Miles's Room. Busy week for us. It's been our third episode of the week, and you could say we saved the best for last. We have the woman, the myth, the legend, the great and powerful Heather Monahan joining us today. Her credentials are phenomenal. I'll just give you sort of the top of the resume, and we'll spend some time with Heather. Let's see. A TEDx speaker. She has a very successful podcast. She's a best-selling author, and as I was telling her a few moments ago, because I've known her for years, and I just checked out your new and improved fancy website, her website is terrific. It's all coming up Heather these days, pretty much.
Oh my gosh, it is a lot of work.
It's hard to build an empire.
It truly is. And it's funny because 4 years ago, I launched my website and took my social media handles public. I was still in corporate America. I was a chief revenue officer. And I knew that there was something bigger out there, but I didn't know how to build it or where to start. And I just said, okay, I'll just put up a site and see what happens. The amount of work over the last 4 years to get it where it is today, the amount of failures, the amount of success, the amount of challenges and struggles, it's been overwhelming and constantly evolving. But yeah, I'm pretty proud for where I am today.
Well, I have so many questions. This is going to be such a fun half hour because what you just said in that first answer, I want to talk about all the highs and lows because so many of the people who watch this show, who follow me on Facebook and Instagram, they're like me and you. We've started our own thing and they're doing it as well. So I know we're going to get a ton of questions, which is the perfect segue to what I was going to say. We take your questions live. So I'm just on Facebook Live right now on my phone, and I'm just going to, as questions come in, I'll just ask him to Heather. So anything you want to know about entrepreneurship, she is the person to ask because she's been killing it. So let's talk about that. I don't know if anybody really thinks it's super easy to go off and do your own thing, but I don't know if people realize how hard it is. I mean, you and I have talked about this. It is a nonstop grind every day, right?
Yeah. And the pandemic is such a great example of life just happens there. You have no control. So for me, my keynote speaking business was blowing up in the past probably 9 months. It really started accelerating. It became my number one revenue stream. I was getting paid really good money and starting to make really good money. And then all of a sudden, pump the brakes, it's over. And so, in this idea of constant evolution and changing your business and running into fear and facing it head on instead of staying stuck, which is more of what my life was like in corporate America, I just knew right away, pivot, do something different, showcase your value, your skill set, your unique value proposition online in a virtual fashion. What did that look like? I had no freaking idea. March 15th. I mean, I was sad. I cried because I was so proud of what I had built and I had so many great events coming up. And then I just had to take a minute, feel sad, and then say, okay, am I still a great speaker? Hell yeah, I am. Okay, can I do it through a different platform? And I didn't know because, listen, until you start doing something, you don't know if you're going to be good at it, and you need to practice and get better. So people started reaching out to me right away saying, could you speak at this virtual summit for free? And I said, yes. Here I am in my mind going backwards in my career. I didn't speak for free now for a few years, but okay, I'll do it. I want to learn virtual. I want to learn how to best present myself. I want to learn, and then I want to get testimonials. And so I started doing all these virtual speaking engagements for free, getting really great testimonials. Then I started charging. 2 weeks in, I started charging. And I mean, I was getting 15,000 a speech in person, and I started with charging 1,000 because I didn't know what's fair or not fair. And I got a phone call from AT&T last week, and they're putting together their virtual roster for their event next month. And I asked them, what is the budget that you have for speakers? And they said $8,000 a speaker. And I said, looks like I've been undervaluing myself a little bit. So yet again, I'm learning all over again.
Yeah, and it's a different skill speaking to a camera lens than speaking to hundreds or maybe even thousands of people. So I'm curious for you, how long did it take you to feel really confident? Was it your first try doing a virtual speech? What was that process like?
I still get nervous anytime that I'm going to speak because people are paying you to deliver on something. And there's just this pressure that you want to kill it because you're usually they forewent another speaker and chose you. And you had to sell yourself through or whatever. And you have these great testimonials. Now you need to recreate it again. So it doesn't matter if I'm speaking live or virtually. I always get a little nervous, but I have a routine that I go through like Pavlov's dog. Like I put the music on, I put the outfit on, I sniff the lavender, and I get in this zone, just like my TED Talk. And I know, okay, I'm about to go kill it. And I just feel really excited, fine line between fear and excitement. And I step into the excitement part of it. And I've just learned that, in some ways, my testimonials from virtual speaking right away were fantastic. And I know that I liken it to like Peloton, which has been saving me through the pandemic. And I ride the Peloton every single day. Some teachers really translate through the computer, which is like what you said, and some don't. It's different than being in person. Some people have that connection and some don't. Some are just better in person. And for whatever reason or whatever tactics that I have implemented, it's connecting, it's working. And I'm just so grateful for that opportunity because I didn't want to lose that piece of my business. Yes, it's different now, but one of the things that I do is when I start talking, I like to reach out to people. So I'll say, okay, wait a minute, I need a show of hands. And I'm usually doing these meetings on Zoom, so I can only see a portion of the audience at one time, but they forget, and I'll say, all right, I need a show of hands right now. Who here in this room has a sibling? Let me see, put it up. And so like I start responding to that and they like that. And then I'll always say, everyone, welcome to my home. I can't believe you came to my home today. Like, so I do these funny little things that make people feel like you're really connecting with them individually. And I think that that's pretty powerful.
And I think, you're nailing the energy component of it because I'm working with people who are training to give speeches virtually, and a common question of theirs, a common concern of theirs is the energy, because again, when you're in a room with hundreds of people, it's super easy. You get that round of applause, you get the show of hands, you get the laughter, and you feel it. But when you have to manufacture it, it's different, especially if you haven't done it a lot, and I think everyone has their own process in terms of how they visualize the audience. For some people, it's put a picture of your friend or your husband or your wife right above the camera lens so you have someone to talk to. Maybe for some people, it's just visually imagine a packed house giving you a standing ovation. And then for some others, it's even just focus on your own performance and just give everything you have to the camera. So I'm always so fascinated. I could talk to 100 inspirational speakers and they're going to give me 100 different methodologies as to what works. It's so cool to find your own thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't even thought that through, but it makes a lot of sense what you were just explaining. I guess it hasn't been intentional, but one of the things that I definitely do is I follow the person that booked me, because usually they're the host of the meeting and they're right in front. So I really, I'm speaking to them. That just by default, because I can see their response. And usually if they're laughing in the first minute, it's kind of like, oof, all right, we're fine. We're good. We're off and running.
Right. And then if they're not, you're like, is my connection working? Am I having,
hello? Is my mic on? Hello?
Hello? So let's go back. And again, if you're just joining us, we are talking with Heather Monahan. If you have questions about reinventing yourself, about building a successful business, about learning from failure, about any of these things, Heather is a champion of all of these things. You can go to her website later, not now. Now you're watching us, and you can see all this and learn about her books and her podcast. Let's go back, and if people watch your TED Talk, they'll hear some of this. But you had a really successful corporate America 9-to-5 job, but it wasn't without its problems. And through a turn of events that were not your own making, your life evolved. But it turned out to be kind of the best thing that ever happened to you, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really hard. I'm not going to lie. It has not been easy. A lot of times people look at me or they look at my post and they think she has it so easy. No, heck no. I'm a single mom and, the pressure financially has been massive. I had created this career in corporate America where I was making a tremendous amount of money in the corporate America world, which is very different than the entrepreneur world. There's way more potential to make more money as an entrepreneur, but you're maxed out at a certain number when you're working for a publicly traded company. So I was at the highest end. I was in the C-suite and I was doing an amazing job. I had just been named one of the most influential women in radio. And I was super proud of my work. However, there was a woman at the company that hated me and was constantly trying to sabotage me and playing those political games. And just anyone who's been in corporate America knows that BS that goes on where you have to smile, but you really don't want to smile. You want to throw something at somebody, but you're not allowed to do that. So
But the world would be better if you could, wouldn't
yeah.
it?
No, yeah. Well, I ultimately, in the end, I basically did do that figuratively, but you know, I was not happy and I was constantly being judged and put down, and it was a horrible feeling. But in my mind, I thought there was nothing I could do. I used to say golden handcuffs. What am I going I'm great at my job. I built this team. I've been here 14 years. What am I going to do? Leave? And I just never thought it was possible. And then that woman got promoted to CEO and she fired me immediately. And in that time, I had signed a non-compete that I wouldn't work anywhere in that industry for a year if I ever left the company for any reason. And so I knew I couldn't go back to the industry that I had built my career in and that I had so much success in. So I just kind of thought to myself, if I'm going to start over as a rookie and at ground zero, I might as well roll the dice on me and just give it a shot. And that's what led me to ending up writing my first book and self-publishing Confidence Creator, which trumped for #1 in business biography the first week that it came out. That led me to launching a speaking career because I wanted to learn how to sell books because I needed a product to sell and I wanted to drive revenue. And then that led me to signing with GDA speakers, Harry Walker Speaker Agency, all the biggest speaker agencies, and led me to headlining conferences, interviewing Sarah Blakely live on stage, and led me to launching my podcast. So it's just been this crazy evolution over the past couple of years that has been a wild ride.
And I will tell you from knowing you over those years, and I'll tell the people watching, one of the things about you that I admire the most, and I think the main reason I was like to have you here, is that you are a hustler. You know, none of this has been given to you. Now it's probably getting easier for you because you're established, but you would pitch yourself to me when I was hosting for the CW. You didn't have a marketing team and doing all this fancy stuff. You would just say, hey, can I be on the show? And it wouldn't just be, hey, we're friends, can I be on the show? No, it would be, I'd like to be on your show. I'm going to add value. Here's how. And then you come on the show and you kill it. And I think, you know, there is look, to be a successful small business owner, entrepreneur, you gotta hustle. I mean, you're not just gonna wake up and say, all right, I'm gonna go sell cookies and people are gonna buy them. I mean, it is like a 24/7 thing. So I guess the question here is, with regards to advice, people watching who wanna do this, you know, how do you maintain, I guess, can you maintain a work-life balance, and what does that even look like? Or are you always working all the time?
I mean, I just had this conversation with a very good friend. She was trying to make the decision in the pandemic. Maybe this is just where I should go to work for myself. I'm sick of working for someone else. This is the time. We're home anyways. Maybe I just launch my company and leave my job. And I explained to her, I said, I want you to understand something. Creating your own company and launching as an entrepreneur, those first few years, you will work 24/7 nonstop. There is no vacation. There are no breaks. Because you have to build up this momentum, this credibility, this funnel to sell people your product, services, whatever it is. And that stuff doesn't happen miraculously. It happens through consistency and hard work and dedication and a lot of fails. And so I'm explaining this to her and she says, well, I'm just not like you. And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, I can just do it and not work that hard. And I said, no, I'm telling you, you cannot. And this is interesting though for people to hear. She said, well, I don't feel that I want to be as successful as you do. So I'm just going to do a scaled down version of this. And this is so important for people to know. There is no such thing as a scaled down entrepreneur because you're either half doing it or you're all in and you're going to succeed. You can't say, oh, I don't need to make $1 million a year, so I just work half as hard as her. No, because you're not going to hit that tipping point. And in order to really start to get things to click, to have repeat customers, to, you know, get the testimonials, to have reach and build a funnel and audience that you're selling to, that stuff just takes consistency and digging and grinding. And you can't just half that or you'll never connect those dots and allow the business to flourish or kind of auto run, which is what she was hoping for. She was saying, I can just get a few clients and just keep re-signing them. And I wish it was that easy, but unfortunately it isn't.
And you also along the way end up learning all these new skills that you never thought you would have or need. Like you become your own website developer, or, you know, you're now your own marketing person and you're handling social media. Or in your case, you became a host, which is great. You have this really successful podcast now, and you've gone from being the person interviewed all the time. Now you're interviewing the Gary Vaynerchuks of the world, and I want you to run down your guest list. How does it feel, now that you're a host? Am I doing okay? Are you evaluating my performance in this conversation?
No. Oh my gosh, no. I'm so not a judger, by the way. That's just not my style. I'm like a cheerleader. I'm just proud of you for doing it. But you know, it's interesting. And I was on Caitlin Bristow's show a few months ago, and she felt the exact same way that I felt. Her show's huge. She has like 20 million downloads an episode. It's a monster show. And she and I were talking off air. She interviewed me and I interviewed her both for our podcast. And after I said, I have a question for you. Which are you more comfortable in? And she said, hands down, being interviewed. She said, I get so nervous interviewing. And I feel that same way in the regard. I'm very comfortable being myself and just like walking into any situation. I don't care if it's Fox News, if it's CW, or where. It doesn't matter to me. I'll just show up and be me and it'll be great. But when you have the pressure to interview someone, not like you and I where we know each other, but like a Gary Vaynerchuk, for example, I need to do all the research. I've got to ask the great questions. I want to watch his other interviews. I want to see how he responds to certain dynamics. I want to be able to create the most value and the most interesting, successful interview. There's a lot of pressure there. You don't just show up and be yourself. I mean, you do, but you also have to do a lot of work and hope that the guest is open. I've had some guests say to me, well, we're not going to talk about that, or I don't want to get into that. And there's so many variables when you're interviewing someone else, and it really comes down to you putting that work in. That I get much more stressed when I'm interviewing someone else, and I'm much more at ease when I get interviewed.
Yeah, for sure, because you hit the nail on the head. You don't always know what you're going to get from a guest. You might even get a guest who's great 95% of the time, but they happen to be in a bad mood that day. And you're expecting this really fun, cool interview. You get all these great questions, and then they don't want to talk to you. But that's where I think to be a great host, it's sort of equal parts preparation, but then also, being in the moment and being present and being a good listener. So you have your list of questions, but sometimes you just got to throw those questions away and just audible and just lock in and pay attention and be present and be spontaneous. Of the people that you've interviewed, gosh, it's such probably, you could talk about this for a half an hour, but I'm sure you've gotten some pearls of wisdom, just some unbelievable things. And I've seen you posted on social. What are some of the really incredible nuggets that you've gotten from these people that you've talked to?
I've had some of the biggest guests that there are on my show. And I'll tell you, the person that immediately comes to mind is someone you're not going to know who he is. He's one of the smallest, lesser known guests I've ever had, but he's my favorite guest ever. His name's Flip Flippin'. And I actually cried off air because he touched me so profoundly with his story and his message. And this is one of my earlier episodes when I first launched the show, but he had written a book called, I think it's Your Third Story. It's basically this whole concept that you're born into a life being told a story that your parents have created. It's not real. It's not yours, but it's what they've created. And you take that story on. As you take that story on, it becomes a second story. It's kind of like a telephone game. So you heard bits and pieces from your parents of what the story was. And so you start making that your own. So now the first story is the one you're being told. The second one is the one that you're not aware you're creating or following along with. And then his whole thing is the third story is the one that you're actually holding the pen, you are in charge of, and you are going to start telling yourself and creating a completely different story that serves you, that goes to work for you. And for me, I cried after he and I got off the show, and he and I stayed on to talk for a while after, because he taught me that I had been telling myself as a child I wasn't the smart one, because I had a sister that was a smart one. And I let that limit me in school, and I let that limit me in my career, and I let that make me feel afraid when I would go into meetings with people from Harvard. And I mean, there were so many instances as I sat there listening to him and learning that I had been telling myself a story that wasn't real and it was never mine, but it was something that I just took on from bits and pieces that I was told. And, that wasn't the extent of all of the story, but it's a great episode, first and foremost, for anyone to listen to. But whenever I speak now, I challenge people to identify what is that story that you're telling yourself, the one that's limiting you and holding you back. And I challenge people to rewrite that story into something that's empowering. And I I've lived through this situation myself. It works. It sets you free. And I can only imagine how much further along I'd be in life had I been telling myself a better story for the past 45 years.
Yeah, I think for the people who say that positive self-talk is hokey, no, it's not. It's, as a public speaking coach, the number one thing that people come to me for is stage fright, being afraid, being nervous when they speak in public. That is the number one thing. And I talk with them about some of what you're just saying, reframing the narrative, thinking about it differently, using different verbs and adjectives when talking about your upcoming speech. It's not that I have to do it, it's that I get to do it. It's not a problem, it's a challenge, or it's even an opportunity. I even tell them to do something that I call the permission slip technique, which is essentially writing down your resume and your career highlights, because people have accomplished so many wonderful things that they forget about in the moment, right? Like early on in your success story, you've been a badass for as long as I've known you, but I think when that light goes on, or when the microphone is hot, or when you're sitting in a room with someone from Harvard, you might forget all the cool things that you've done, and you're just thinking about all of the things that you've never done. So, gosh, the mind is so powerful both ways, right?
It's unbelievable, but most of us are so unaware of that power. I certainly was for the majority of my life. I was just going through the motions, go to work every day, get up, do this, go to the gym, come home, spend time with my son, whatever. But I wasn't intentional and mindful about these things. And somebody had told me back then, you should really take a look into, how you view yourself. Or I would have thought, these people are from Woodstock and I have no idea what they're talking, they're crazy. But I'm so grateful for those low moments I had, like getting fired. It really forced me to reevaluate everything. And what role was I playing in holding myself back? And how could I change that? And when you start digging into something and you start focusing on it, you start finding solutions. And that's exactly what I did for myself. And I hope it for everybody.
And I think, what you're saying right now is so topical. It's so timely, because there are people watching who, have lost their jobs, or even if they're not making the money they were making. This is a scary time for a lot of people. So if people are watching and they're ready to finally reinvent and pivot and start their own business, but it seems overwhelming, let's be honest, that's a huge daunting task to undertake. How do you start? What is your kind of step one for people so it's not so overwhelming?
Well, there's a number of different things you can do, right? So I'm someone that I believe in baby steps. So if I wake up in the morning and I'm stressed out about launching something, I go do the dishes, and then I'm going to go do the laundry, because that builds momentum for me. The more I take action, it propels me to the next action, which is ultimately going to propel me to the call that I'm putting off or I'm nervous about or whatever. So for me, baby steps works. For other people, hiring a coach, like for, if they want to give a speech, hire Dave. Hiring someone that is light years ahead of you so they can give you the blueprint and help coach you along. That's a great solution. There's so many resources out there with, YouTube, podcasts. There's so many ways to reach out and be mentored by someone, even if you don't want to hire them. But, beyond that, I'm a big fan of what I did when I got fired, which was I created a 30-day plan. And I've encouraged everybody in quarantine to do this. It's too hard when you don't know what's coming. So when I got fired, I had no idea what 5 years down the road looked like. For all of us here in pandemic, we don't know what 6 months from now looks like. But for 30 days, that's manageable. And we can create a piece of paper with 30 squares on it. And we can create a vision of how we want to feel. I have this life-size cutout of myself right here in my living room. And I'm super confident in this image. It's like power, and I love it. And it screams confidence to me. I don't feel like that every day, right? Like my roots are a mess. I don't get up and get my hair done all the time like I used. I just don't feel that confident version of me every day. So on the days that I don't, I look to that image to remember who I am. And I encourage other people, find that image of you when you were confident or when you were at your best. And let's recreate that image for now as a goal. And what are the action steps that you're going to take daily? There's so many different ways to do it. You can practice gratitude. You can exercise and move your body. You can meditate. You can surround yourself with positive messaging. Turn off the freaking news if it's putting you in a bad mood. Don't call that relative that wants to scream about how horrible life is and talk to you about unemployment. Tune out the bad, fire the villains, and surround yourself with information and positivity and people who are challenging you to grow, and take steps into your fear as small as it can be or as big as it can be, because when you start to do that, you really start creating confidence within yourself and trust within yourself. And the more you listen to yourself and your intuition, the more you take action against it and step into it, the more opportunity that you will create. And in those moments, that's where you really create sustainable confidence within you. And once you are confident, you can move forward and do whatever you want to do.
That was awesome. I feel like running through a wall for you now. If there was a football game to play, you'd be the head coach. That was gold right there. Unfortunately, I can't pay you what AT&T is paying you to say that. But well said. Anyway, that's so poignant on so many levels. I want to jump back in the few minutes that we have left to your TED Talk, which we're gonna, before you say goodbye, you're gonna tell everybody how to see all your stuff, and it's a great TED Talk. I had seen it before. I watched it again today, and I remember when you mentioned you have the giant life-size picture of you, which is cool. But if tell me if I'm getting this right, because I think I remember seeing this. You posted this on LinkedIn. After you did your talk, didn't you get some pushback with regard to the topic that you chose?
So when I first got approved to give my TEDx, I submitted the idea and the concept C student to C-suite. And my whole talk was about how we're told that straight A students are the ones that will be most successful. However, I was an average student and I got to the highest level in corporate America. And I'm going to tell you why that worked for me and why it would work for anyone else that's an average student. So I love the concept. I love the idea. And a month before, and they loved it too, but a month before I was going live to give my talk, they called me and said, we want something sexier. We want something deeper.
Who's they? TED? The TED Talk people?
Yeah, whenever you give a TEDx talk, you're essentially working for a team of people that volunteer at TED and on behalf of TED, and they're in charge. And so it's their call. It's not yours. They have to approve and accept your idea. And they had accepted mine, but after they met again as a team, they decided they thought I could do better and dig deeper. And so they came to me and said, all right, we need something better. And that was a hard last month going in, because I knew I could really go to that story that I hadn't ever really shared of what the day that I got fired and what really happened behind the scenes. But it would be really hard, because at first I used to cry when I would think about that story. I'm beyond that now, but it still is a really awful memory, and I didn't know if I wanted to live in infamy on TED, and so there was a lot of second guessing that went on for me. But in the end, I'm super proud of my talk. It's 10 minutes that will knock you over. I've gotten great feedback, and I'm grateful that I did pull it off in the end.
And the best speeches are always the ones that where people are vulnerable and they take risks. And that's a lesson for anybody who wants to speak about anything. If you just go up there and speak about formulas and math equations, nobody cares, even if you're a mathematician, right? You have to bare your soul and just be open. And your talk is, you are totally vulnerable. You put yourself out there, which is awesome. Okay, this will probably take about 15 minutes, but tell everybody all the ways they can find you and watch you and listen to you.
So I'm on social media everywhere. I'm on every platform at Heather Monahan. And I will just say in advance, do not try to connect to me on LinkedIn. I'm maxed out. You can just click follow and you can follow me there, but I cannot accept any more connections. And I constantly get messages about that. It's out of my control. Okay, I have a website. It's heathermonahan.com. You can check me out there. I have a podcast called Creating Confidence with Heather Monahan, anywhere and everywhere you find podcasts. I have a book called Confidence Creator. I have a new book that's coming out next year called Leapfrogging Villains. I'm super excited about that. And my TED Talk, if you just type in Heather Monahan TED Talk, it pops right up on TED.
That was under 15 minutes, and we got all the information. Thank you for joining me. Miles says thank you. It's always great to talk to you. I really enjoyed it. Thanks, Heather.
So great to see you. And Miles is adorable. So happy for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll see you again soon. And as we say goodbye, I just want to thank everybody for watching all week. And we've got some more shows booked for next week. I'll give you information about that. So have a great night, everyone, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks again.